Most pirate stories that people know are myths and legends, tales about buried gold, secret maps written in invisible ink, and endless treasure hunts across deserted islands that lead nowhere. These are stories we tell ourselves for entertainment, stories that blur the line between what actually happened and what we wish had happened. But one pirate ship actually proved that the legends contain some truth. Not in fiction, or in theory, or in the imaginations of storytellers. It proved itself in the real world, underneath the sand, under the ocean, forgotten for over 250 years. And when it was finally found, brought back to light after centuries of darkness, it did not just reveal treasure and riches. It revealed a hidden chapter of history that was never meant to resurface, a chapter that changed everything historians thought they knew about pirates and power. By the end of this story, you will understand why this discovery shocked historians around the world. It changed fundamentally what we know about pirates and their economics, and exposed how fragile even the most powerful empires really were in the age of the Atlantic. Because this was not just a story about gold and silver. It was about power, about control, about a system built on risk and violence and reward. And at the center of everything was a single ship that disappeared without a trace into the ocean, until the ocean, many years later, gave it back. It all started in 1717. During what historians call the Golden Age of piracy, the Atlantic Ocean was crowded with ships, carrying goods, money, and secrets between continents. Trade routes were busy, wealth was flowing. And among the pirates roaming those dangerous waters was a man named Samuel Bellamy. He was not just any pirate. He was young, ambitious, and unusually strategic in his thinking. Unlike many pirates who lived day to day, thinking only about their next meal and their next drink, Bellamy thought bigger. He did not just want to survive another day. He wanted to build something lasting. A fleet, a system, a fortune. He had vision. Bellamy captured a slave ship called the Whydah Gally. At first glance, it looked like just another vessel, just another target, just another ship to raid and take whatever goods were aboard. But in reality, it was something far more valuable than most pirate prizes. The Whydah was not empty or lightly loaded. It was heavily loaded with treasure. Gold, silver, and goods that had been collected from years of trade across the entire Atlantic Ocean. Merchants and traders had spent decades accumulating this wealth, and when Bellamy seized the ship, he did not just take a vessel. He took control of what was probably one of the richest pirate prizes in history. But here is what most people miss when they look at this story. Bellamy did not hoard all the wealth for himself. He shared it with his crew. This was not generosity or kindness or some noble principle. It was strategy, pure and simple. Pirates worked on a system of profit sharing, where every member of the crew got a percentage of the treasure. This system made them more loyal and more dangerous than traditional naval crews who served under officers and got paid regular salaries. Every pirate had a stake in the outcome. Everyone had something to lose if the operation failed. And that made them willing to fight harder than any army. With the Whydah under his command, Bellamy became something more than just a pirate. He became a leader of a growing pirate operation. The ship itself became a floating vault, holding the accumulated wealth of their raids. But it also became a symbol. A symbol of freedom from government control. A symbol of rebellion against established authority. A symbol of an alternative economy operating entirely outside the rules of governments and empires. And this is where things begin to shift in the story. Because the more successful Bellamy and his pirates became, the more attention they attracted from official powers. Naval forces from England and from other European nations began to respond to the pirate threat. This was not a casual or disorganized response. It was aggressive and coordinated. Piracy had stopped being just a crime. It had become a threat to global trade itself. It had become a threat to the very system that empires depended on. And the Whydah, being the most famous and most successful pirate ship, became a target. Everyone was looking for it. Everyone wanted to capture Bellamy and recover the stolen treasure. In April of 1717, everything changed in a moment. A violent storm hit the Atlantic Ocean. The Whydah was caught directly in its path. There were massive waves, the kind that can swallow ships whole. There were unpredictable winds that changed direction constantly. There were no modern navigation systems, no radar, no computers. Just instinct and experience and luck. The ship struggled against the elements. The crew fought to keep the vessel afloat. And then, disaster struck. The Whydah ran aground near Cape Cod, striking a sandbar with tremendous force. The impact was catastrophic and immediate. The ship broke apart in the chaos and violence of the collision. Within minutes, everything collapsed. The beautiful ship that Bellamy had built his empire upon. The treasure that he had worked so hard to accumulate. The crew that he had gathered. The entire system that he had created. All of it gone. But here is what nobody saw coming, what surprised everyone. Only a handful of people survived the wreck. Bellamy himself did not survive. The man who had built the operation, who had created the system, who had dreamed of an alternative to traditional society, disappeared with his ship. And just like that, the richest pirate treasure ever recorded in history vanished into the ocean. It sank into the deep water and was lost. For centuries after that disaster, the Whydah was considered to be lost forever. Historians had written records of it. They knew the ship had existed. But they had no physical evidence. No confirmed wreck. No recovered treasure. Just stories passed down from person to person, slowly fading into legend, becoming myth. Nobody even knew exactly where the ship had sunk. The ocean had reshaped the coastlines. Storms had moved sand around. The exact location became unclear. But here is where the mystery deepens and becomes more interesting. Because the ocean does not just destroy everything forever. It hides things. It preserves them under layers of sand and mud. It protects them from the air and the sun that would otherwise destroy them. For 250 years, the Whydah and its treasure sat hidden under the sand off the coast of Cape Cod. Fast forward to 1984. A man named Barry Clifford, a marine explorer and diver, began searching for the Whydah. He was motivated not by dreams of gold or riches for himself. He was motivated by a belief, a conviction, that the ship still existed somewhere beneath the sand. Most experts and historians thought he was wasting his time and resources. After all, over 250 years had passed since the ship sank. Storms had continuously reshaped the coastline. Wooden wrecks decay over time. Metal corrodes and becomes unrecognizable. Wood rots into pieces so small you cannot find them. There was no guarantee that anything remained. But Clifford kept searching anyway, diving again and again, looking at the seabed, searching for any sign. And then something unusual appeared. Artifacts. First a bell, an old bell from the ship. Then cannons, heavy iron cannons. Then more objects scattered across the seabed. Each discovery confirmed one essential thing: he was in the right place. He had found the Whydah. And this is where everything changed in the story. Because the Whydah was not just a rumor anymore. It was not just a legend. It was real. It was there. And it could be studied. But the biggest shock was not that the ship was found. It was what was inside it. Because the Whydah was not stripped clean by time and the ocean. It still contained a massive collection of artifacts tied directly to the pirate era. Objects that gave historians something they had never had before. A physical snapshot of what pirate life actually looked like, not imagined, not reconstructed from stories, but real, actual objects that people had touched and used. This changed everything about how historians understood pirates. Here is what most people miss when they think about pirates. They were not just criminals or monsters. They were part of an alternative economic system. One built on shared risk and shared reward and extreme uncertainty. The Whydah represents that system frozen in time. Every single object recovered from the wreck told a story. Weapons showed how conflicts were resolved. Tools showed what work the crew did. Coins from different countries showed the global scope of their trade. Personal items like buttons and buckles showed the humanity of the people involved. Each one reflected a life shaped by instability and opportunity. Piracy, at its core, was an early form of high-risk economics. It was like venture capitalism with guns. Success depended on timing, on coordination, on the ability to control unpredictable environments. It was dangerous, it was illegal, but it worked. At least for a while, when you look closer at how Bellamy operated. A clear pattern emerges. The pirates who succeeded were not always the strongest or the most violent. They were the ones who understood leverage, control the ship and you control movement, control the crew and you control loyalty, control the treasure and you control motivation, control the risk and you control who survives. Bellamy's approach was not random or chaotic, it was structured. It was almost like a business model operating outside the law, and that is what made it effective, but it also made it fragile. Because once the system collapsed, once the ship sank and Bellamy died, everything collapsed with it. There was nobody else with the power or vision to rebuild it. Now compare that to today's financial systems. Global markets connected electronically, banking networks spanning the world, central institutions like central banks that try to manage the economy. At their core, these modern systems rely on trust, just like pirate crews relied on shared belief in their system. And in Bellamy's leadership, when confidence is strong, when people believe the system will continue, systems expand and grow. When confidence breaks, when people doubt, systems fail very quickly. Inflation, debt, and market instability often follow the same pattern that we see in high-risk environments like piracy. Rapid growth fueled by optimism, followed by sudden collapse when reality becomes impossible to ignore. The Whydah story is not just ancient history. It is a reminder of how quickly value can appear and disappear. It is a reminder of how fragile all systems are. As more artifacts were recovered from the wreck, historians began to reconstruct what life aboard the ship was actually like. They did not just find the wealth. They found the structure of daily existence. They found evidence of who worked where on the ship. They found how the crew operated and made decisions. They discovered that pirates were not chaotic and disorganized in the way popular culture suggests. They had rules, they had systems. They even had forms of democracy in some cases, where decisions were made collectively, but none of their organization could protect them from the ocean. Nothing they did could protect them from nature's unpredictability. The storm was stronger than they were. Here is the most important realization from the Whydah discovery. The treasure was not the gold or the silver. The real treasure was the insight that the discovery provided. Because the Whydah is the only confirmed pirate ship in history where both the vessel itself and all of its artifacts were recovered together intact. That means historians did not just find treasure. They found evidence of how pirate economies actually functioned, evidence of how risk was distributed among crew members, evidence of how power operated outside formal institutions, and most importantly, evidence that entire systems can exist, thrive, and disappear without leaving much trace behind until something brings them back into the light. The Whydah did not just sink in 1717. It disappeared from human knowledge for over 250 years. And yet, when it resurfaced, when it was rediscovered, it forced the entire world to rethink what we know about history, about economics, about power, about systems. Because sometimes the systems that seem the most chaotic and disorganized on the surface are actually built on very clear rules underneath. Rules that only become visible when everything else falls apart. The Whydah teaches us that history is not always buried forever, and when it does resurface, it can change everything we thought we knew.